The stars burned cold and distant as the massive warship tore through the darkness of space. The vessel was called the Throne of Silence, and it was one of the most powerful ships in the Empire. Its hull stretched nearly 2 km long, covered in weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. For 300 years, this ship had brought death to dozens of worlds. Entire civilizations had fallen before its guns, but tonight the Throne of Silence was dying. Commander stood on the bridge and watched the damage report scroll across his screen. The numbers were bad. The numbers were very bad. Half the ship was on fire. The main reactor was failing. The weapons were offline. The shields had collapsed 20 minutes ago and showed no sign of coming back. How did this happen? He whispered to himself. He knew how it happened. The Ani rebels had ambushed them near the edge of the Sol system. They had conquered the Ani 50 years ago, but some of them still refused to accept their place as slaves. They had hidden ships in the asteroid field. They had waited, and when the Throne of Silence passed by, they had attacked with everything they had. The rebels were all dead now. The Throne of Silence had destroyed every single one of their ships, but the damage was done. The mighty warship was crippled beyond repair. Commander said his second officer, a thin named X, we have located a planet nearby, Class 4 world, primitive inhabitants, no space travel capability. Turn to look at the main screen. A blue and green world floated in the blackness of space. It was small, unremarkable. According to the ship's database, the natives called it Earth. What do you know about them? Asked X. Checked her records. They are mammals, bipedal. They have basic technology, fossil fuel engines, primitive nuclear weapons. They have not yet developed faster than light travel. Our last survey was conducted 200 years ago. They were rated as a Class 7 species, no threat potential. Nodded slowly. Class 7 was the lowest rating the Empire gave to intelligent life. It meant the species was too primitive to be useful as slaves and too weak to be worth conquering. Earth was simply not worth the Empire's attention. We cannot save the ship, said it. Heard him to admit this truth. The Throne of Silence had been his home for 60 years. He had commanded this vessel through 100 battles, but facts were facts. Order all crew to the escape pods. We will abandon the vessel and signal for rescue. What about the ship itself? Commander X asked. Should we activate the self-destruct? Considered this question. Standard protocol demanded that they destroy any vessel that could not be recovered. Technology inside was too valuable to risk falling into enemy hands. But he looked at the blue planet on his screen and laughed. No, he said, let it crash on that primitive world. What will those creatures do with it? They cannot even leave their own atmosphere. They will poke at the wreckage with sticks and wonder what it is. In 1,000 years, they might learn enough to understand what they are looking at. By then, the technology will be worthless. Exodator head as you command. The evacuation took 3 hours, 12,000 crew members loaded into escape pods and launched into space. They watched from a safe distance as the Throne of Silence began its final journey. The great ship fell toward Earth, pulled down by the planet's gravity. It entered the atmosphere like a falling star. The humans below looked up and saw a streak of fire crossing their sky. They did not know what they were seeing. They thought it was a meteor. They made wishes on it. They had no idea that their entire world was about to change. The throne of silence crashed in the frozen wilderness of Siberia. The impact shook the ground. For hundreds of km, it created a crater 3 km wide. Trees burned, ice melted, animals fled in terror, and then there was silence. Commander watched the crash from his escape pod. He felt a moment of sadness for his lost ship, but the sadness passed quickly. He would receive a new command. The Empire had thousands of ships. The loss of one vessel meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. Mark the location, he told X. Perhaps someday we will return to harvest the raw materials. And the natives, she asked, shrugged his shoulders. What about them? They are insects. They do not matter. The escape pods activated their emergency beacons and drifted through space, waiting for rescue. Within a week, a patrol ship arrived to collect them. Commander filed his report about the loss of the throne of silence. The Empire noted the incident and promptly forgot about it. There were more important matters to attend to: wars to fight, worlds to conquer, slaves to control. Earth was not worth thinking about. This was the greatest mistake the Empire ever made. The humans found the crash site. Within 6 hours, satellite systems detected the impact. Seismic stations recorded the shock wave. Military radar tracked the object as it fell from the sky. Within minutes, every government on Earth knew that something had crashed in Siberia. Something big, something that was definitely not a normal meteor. The Russian government sent the first team. Soldiers and scientists traveled by helicopter to the remote location. They expected to find a crater full of space rock. What they found instead made them question everything they believed about the universe. The object in the crater was clearly artificial. It was made of metal. It had shapes and patterns that could only come from intelligent design. It was enormous, even broken and burning. It was the largest machine any human had ever seen. Colonel was the first human to walk up to the wreckage. He was a veteran soldier who had seen many strange things in his life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He stood at the edge of the crater and stared at the alien ship with his mouth hanging open. Mother of God, he whispered. The news spread around the world. Within hours, an alien spacecraft had crashed on Earth. The existence of extraterrestrial life was now confirmed. Humanity was not alone in the universe. Some people celebrated, some people panicked. Religious leaders struggled to explain what this meant for their faiths. Scientists demanded access to the crash site. Conspiracy theorists claimed that governments had known about aliens for years. The whole world seemed to go crazy overnight. But behind closed doors, the leaders of the world's nations held secret meetings. They agreed on one thing very quickly: this discovery was too important to fight over. This was bigger than any single country. This was a matter for all of humanity. For the first time in history, every major nation on Earth agreed to work together. They formed a secret organization called the Global Recovery Initiative. Its mission was simple: study the alien ship, learn its secrets, and prepare humanity for whatever might come next. Doctor was one of the first scientists chosen for the project. She was a physicist from Argentina who had spent her career studying theoretical technologies. She had written papers about the possibility of faster than light travel. She had dreamed of making contact with alien life. Now that dream was coming true, and she could barely contain her excitement. She arrived at the crash site on a cold December morning. The Russian winter was brutal, but she barely noticed the cold. Her attention was focused entirely on the massive wreck that filled the crater before her. "It is beautiful," she said softly. The man beside her laughed. His name was James, an engineer from the United States. "Beautiful? It looks like someone threw a building through a meat grinder." Shook her head. "You do not see it yet. Look at the curves of the hull. Look at how the pieces fit together. Whoever built this ship understood physics in ways we cannot imagine. This is not just technology, James. This is art." James stared at the wreckage for a long moment. Slowly his expression changed. "I think I see what you mean," he admitted. "The research team spent their first week just mapping the exterior of the ship. It was slow work. The vessel was huge, and large sections of it were still too hot or too dangerous to approach, but piece by piece they began to understand what they were looking at. The ship had three main sections. The front section appeared to be the command center. The middle section held what looked like crew quarters and storage areas. The rear section contained the engines, or what was left of the engines. That part of the ship had taken the worst damage in the crash. "Engine room is completely destroyed," James reported during one of their team meetings. "Whatever powered this thing, it is gone now. Melted slag. We will never know how it worked." Refused to accept this conclusion. "We can still learn from the slag," she said. "Every piece of debris tells a story. We just need to learn how to read it." She was right. Over the following months, the research team made discovery after discovery. They found new metal alloys that were stronger and lighter than anything on Earth. They found computer systems that processed information 1,000 times faster than human technology. They found medical equipment that could heal wounds in minutes. They found weapons that could level mountains. But the most important discovery came from a young engineer named. She was exploring a damaged section of the ship when she found a small room filled with strange machinery. In the center of the room was a crystal sphere about the size of a basketball. "What is this thing?" she asked over her radio. Came to look. She studied the sphere carefully, running her instruments over its surface. Her eyes went wide. "I think this is the ship's computer core," she said. "The brain of the vessel. If we can access the information stored inside, we could learn everything: navigation data, technical specifications, maybe even the history of whoever built this ship." The crystal was cracked. Whatever information it held was locked away behind damaged systems, but refused to give up. She spent months studying the crystal, learning its language, finding ways to extract tiny fragments of data. What she learned changed everything. The ship belonged to something called the Empire. This empire controlled dozens of star systems. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had enslaved countless species. They were powerful beyond human imagination, and they considered humans to be insects. Found records of surveys of Earth. The aliens had visited this planet many times over the centuries. They had watched humans develop from primitive farmers to industrial societies. They had rated humanity as Class 7. No threat potential, not worth conquering, not worth protecting. Just ignore them and let them rot on their little world. The discovery made angry. It made her very angry. They think we are nothing. She told her team they threw away this ship because they believed we were too stupid to understand it. They left it here like garbage. James nodded slowly. So what do we do about it? Smiled. It was not a kind smile. We prove them wrong. We do not just study this ship. We rebuild it. We make it fly again. And when the aliens come back, we show them exactly what these insects can do. The project changed that day. It was no longer just about research. It was about survival. It was about pride. It was about proving that humanity was not as weak and helpless as the aliens believed. More resources poured into the crash site. More scientists and engineers arrived from every country on Earth. They worked day and night, summer and winter. After year, they faced problems that seemed impossible. They found solutions that nobody had imagined before. They had designed their ship with elegant precision. Every system was specialized. Every component was built for one specific purpose. When something broke, you needed exactly the right replacement part or nothing would work. Humans did not have the right replacement parts, so they improvised. They replaced alien circuits with human computer chips. They filled gaps in the hull with steel plates welded by human hands. They rebuilt the power systems using nuclear reactors designed on Earth. The result was ugly. It was crude. It was a mixture of alien elegance and human stubbornness. But it worked. 15 years after the crash, stood in the rebuilt command center of the ship. She was older now. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined with wrinkles, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven her since the beginning. Around her stood the team that had made this miracle possible. James, hundreds of others who had given their lives to this project. They had all sacrificed so much. They had missed birthdays and holidays. They had lost relationships and health, but they had never stopped working. Is it ready? Asked. James nodded. The engines are online. The weapons are charged. The shields are functional. It is not pretty, but it will fly. Reached out and touched the control panel. The ship hummed beneath her fingers, alive with power. The aliens called this ship the Throne of Silence, she said, but that name does not fit anymore. This is not their ship now. This is our ship, a human ship. She turned to face her team. I propose we give it a new name, a human name. We will call it the Prometheus, after the god who stole fire from heaven and gave it to humanity. The team cheered. The name was perfect. Outside, the Siberian winter howled against the walls of the crater, but inside the rebuilt ship, humanity had found its fire. They had taken what the aliens threw away. They had turned garbage into hope. The Empire had forgotten about Earth. They had dismissed humans as insects. They had made the greatest mistake in the history of the galaxy. And someday soon, they would pay for it. The Prometheus waited patiently in its crater, its engines ready, its weapons armed. It waited for the day when the aliens would return. It waited for the chance to show the universe what humans could do. That day was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Looked up through the repaired viewport at the stars above. Somewhere out there, the Empire continued its campaign of conquest. Somewhere out there, billions of slaves suffered under alien rule. Somewhere out there, the commanders who had abandoned this ship were living their comfortable lives, never thinking about the primitive planet they had left Behind, we are coming, whispered two. The stars, we are coming and we will make you remember us, the Prometheus hummed its agreement. Humanity was ready. The rebuilt ship sat in its crater like a sleeping giant. 15 years of work had transformed the broken wreck into something new, something dangerous. The Prometheus was ready to fly, but knew that one ship would never be enough. She stood in her office at the edge of the crash site, staring at data. On her computer screen, the information they had extracted from the alien crystal painted a terrifying picture. The Empire had thousands of warships. They had conquered dozens of star systems. They had destroyed entire civilizations. One human ship against that kind of power was nothing. It was a mosquito. Fighting an elephant, it was suicide. But refused to accept defeat. She had spent 15 years proving that humans could do the impossible. She was not going to stop now. Ips, she said during a meeting with the world leaders who funded the project. The Prometheus is a miracle, but it cannot defend Earth alone. We need a fleet. The leaders looked at each other nervously. Building one ship had nearly bankrupted every nation on the planet. The resources required had been staggering. The secrecy had been almost impossible to maintain. Now this scientist wanted them to do it again. Many times over. How many ships are you talking about? Asked the American president. Did not hesitate. As many as we can build. 50, 100 more if possible. That is impossible, said the Chinese premier. The people will ask questions. They will want to know where their money is going. We cannot hide something this big forever. Leaned forward, then tell them the truth. The room went silent. For 15 years, the existence of the alien ship had been the most closely guarded secret in human history. Only a few thousand people knew the truth. The rest of humanity still believed they were alone in the universe. The secret cannot hold much longer anyway. Continued. We have thousands of people working on this project. Supplies and materials are moving across borders every day. Sooner or later someone will talk. Someone will leak the information. It is better if we control the story. The debate lasted for days. Some leaders wanted to maintain the secrecy at all costs. Others agreed with that the truth would come out eventually. In the end, they reached a compromise. They would reveal the existence of alien life, but they would not reveal the full truth about the Prometheus. Not yet. The announcement shook the world. On a warm spring morning, every television and radio station on Earth broadcast the same message. The leaders of every major nation appeared together, standing in front of the United Nations building in New York. They told humanity that they were not alone. They showed pictures of the alien ship. They explained that visitors from another world had crashed on Earth 15 years ago. They did not mention that the ship had been rebuilt. They did not mention the weapons and shields and engines that were now operational. They simply said that scientists were studying the wreckage and learning from it. The reaction was everything had predicted. There was fear, there was excitement, there was chaos and confusion. Religious groups declared the end times. Scientists demanded more information. Protesters filled the streets in every major city, some celebrating and some demanding answers. But underneath all the noise, something else happened, something that had hoped for but never dared to expect. Humanity began to unite. The old arguments suddenly seemed small and pointless. Wars that had been fought for decades suddenly stopped. Political enemies began talking to each other. Countries that had been rivals for centuries started working together. The knowledge that aliens existed changed everything. Humans looked up at the stars and realized that their petty conflicts did not matter anymore. There were bigger things to worry about. Now the money started flowing. Every nation on Earth contributed to what was publicly called the Global Defense Initiative. Officially, this organization was dedicated to studying alien technology and preparing humanity for possible contact with extraterrestrial life. Unofficially, it was building a fleet of warships, moved her operations from Siberia to the Moon. A massive underground base was constructed in the crater of Here, far from curious eyes. The real work began. The Prometheus was transported into space piece by piece, then reassembled. In lunar orbit, engineers swarmed over its hull, making final adjustments and improvements. Test flights began in secret, the ship moving through the darkness of space where no telescope could track it. Captain Cole was chosen to command the vessel. He was a former fighter pilot from the United States Air Force, a man known for his calm under pressure and his unconventional thinking. He had been one of the first pilots to train on the alien systems, and he had taken to them like he was born for this purpose. She handles like a dream, reported after his first test flight. The engineers did incredible work. This ship is better than anything the aliens could have built. Smiled at the compliment, but she shook her head. Not better, different. The built for precision and elegance. We built for survival and stubbornness. Those are very different philosophies. I like our philosophy better, said. Meanwhile, construction began on the new fleet. The plans were based on the Prometheus, but for mass production. These ships would be smaller and less powerful than the original, but they would be faster to build and easier to crew. They would be good enough. Shipyards were hidden throughout the solar system. One was built in the asteroid belt, disguised as a mining operation. Another was constructed on the dark side of the Moon. A third was hidden beneath the surface of Mars. Every location was chosen for secrecy and security. The work was brutal. Engineers and workers labored in harsh conditions far from their homes and families. Accidents happened, people died, but no one quit. Everyone understood what was at stake. Visited the shipyards often, inspecting progress and solving problems. She was no longer just a scientist. She had become the heart of this entire operation. When workers felt tired or hopeless, they looked at her and found new strength. If this old woman could keep fighting, so could they. James worked beside her as always. He had become her closest friend over the years. They had argued countless times, disagreed about methods and priorities, shouted at each other in frustration. But they had never stopped trusting each other. Do you think they will come back? James asked one night as they shared a meal in the lunar base cafeteria. Considered the question. Yes, I am certain of it. How can you be so sure? Because I have studied them. Said they are conquerors. They take what they want and destroy what they cannot use. Earth has resources they might want someday. Water, metals, biological diversity, and even if they never wanted our resources, they would eventually notice that one of their ships had disappeared, they would come to investigate. James nodded slowly, and when they arrive, they will find us ready. That is the plan. The years passed. The fleet grew. 20 ships became 30. 30 became 50. Each vessel was crewed by volunteers who understood they might never come home. They trained endlessly, learning to fight in ways no human had ever fought before. The tactics they developed were unlike anything in military doctrine. Human pilots flew their ships with a recklessness that would horrify alien commanders. They took risks that seemed suicidal. They pushed their vessels beyond safe limits. They fought dirty, using tricks and traps and deceptions. The aliens have rules, Cole explained to his crews. They have traditions and protocols. They fight the same way their ancestors fought 1,000 years ago. We have no rules. We will do whatever it takes to win. Some people worried about this approach. They said that humans were becoming too aggressive, too willing to sacrifice themselves. Dismissed these concerns. They think we are insects, she said. They expect us to be weak and easily crushed. Our only advantage is surprise. We must be more fierce, more determined, and more willing to sacrifice than they can possibly imagine. That is how insects defeat giants. The training continued. Simulations ran day and night. Pilots practiced attack patterns until they could fly them in their sleep. Engineers drilled on emergency repairs until they could fix a damaged reactor in minutes. Every person in the fleet knew that their lives depended on being better than perfect, and still they waited. Grew older, her hair turned white, her body grew tired, but her mind remained sharp, and her determination never wavered. She spent her days reviewing reports and making plans. She spent her nights looking at the stars, wondering when the enemy would arrive. The answer came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Burst into office without knocking. Her face was pale with shock. We have detected them, said. A fleet has entered the solar system. Felt her heart pound, but her voice remained steady. How many ships? 12 cruiser class. They are approaching from the outer planets. 12 ships. Had hoped for fewer, but 12 was manageable. 12 was something they could handle. Alert the fleet, said. Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel from Luna Base and send Captain Cole to my office immediately. Within hours, the secret human fleet mobilized for the first time. Ships powered up their engines and moved into formation, weapons charged with deadly energy, shields activated and hummed with power. Cole stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching his crew prepare for battle. These men and women had trained for years for this moment. They were ready. He was ready. This is it, he said over the fleet-wide communication channel. This is what we have worked for. Today we show the galaxy that humanity is not to be ignored. Today we fight. The crews responded with cheers. The sound echoed through every ship in the fleet. Watched from the command center on Luna Base. She was too old to join the battle herself, but she would observe every moment. She would witness the result of her life's work. The fleet approached Earth with confidence. They had come to investigate the missing ship, just as had predicted. Their scans showed primitive technology on the planet below, fossil fuel engines, basic nuclear reactors. Nothing that could threaten a proper warship. Commander led the expedition. He had been promoted after the loss of the Throne of Silence, given a new ship and a new crew. He had largely forgotten about the primitive world where his old vessel had crashed. It had been such a small matter, such an unimportant event. Now he was returning, and he expected to find nothing interesting, perhaps the wreckage of his old ship picked over by primitive scavengers, perhaps some confused natives who had seen things they could not understand, nothing to concern the mighty empire. "Sir," said his sensor officer, "I am detecting something strange." Turned to look at his screen. "What is it?" "There appears to be a vessel approaching us, a large vessel." Frowned. "That is impossible. These primitives have no spacecraft capable of reaching us. Nevertheless, sir, my readings are clear. One ship approaching at high speed. Its design is unusual." Pulled up the image on his own screen. What he saw made no sense. The ship approaching them looked like a nightmare. It had the basic shape of a dreadnought, but it was covered in strange modifications. Human technology had been grafted onto the alien hull like patches on a wound. The result was ugly, chaotic, and somehow terrifying. "That is my ship," whispered. "That is the throne of silence." Before he could process this impossible sight, a transmission came through. A human face appeared on his screen, a man with cold eyes and a calm voice. "Fleet, this is Captain Cole of the United Earth Naval Ship Prometheus. You have entered human space without permission. Leave now or we will remove you by force." Stared at the screen in disbelief. Human was threatening him. A primitive insect from a Class 7 world was ordering the Empire to retreat. The idea was so absurd that laughed. "You cannot be serious," he said. "You have one ship. We have 12. Your vessel is patched together, recruited by primitives who have no idea how to use it. Stand aside, insect, and perhaps I will let your people live as slaves instead of corpses." Cole smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You misunderstand the situation, Commander. This is not a request. This is your only warning." Ended the transmission. He turned to his fleet commanders and gave the order that would change the history of the galaxy. Destroy them. The 12 cruisers moved forward, weapons charging. They expected an easy victory. They expected the primitive human ship to break and run. They expected this battle to be over in minutes. They were right about the time. They were wrong about everything else. Back on Luna Base, watched the tactical display with tears in her eyes. 15 years of work, 15 years of sacrifice had all led to this moment. Whatever happened next, humanity would never be the same. "Good luck," she whispered. "Make them remember us." The Prometheus accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Behind it, hidden in the shadow of Earth's moon, 50 more human ships waited for their signal. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The Prometheus shot through space like a bullet fired from God's own gun. Captain Cole stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the approaching enemy fleet. 12 cruisers, 12 ships that were designed to crush anything in their path. Was not impressed. "All stations, report ready," said his first officer. Commander Sarah. She was a former naval commander who had been one of the first to volunteer for the space program. Her voice was steady despite the tension on the bridge. "Weapons charged and targeted," reported the weapons officer. "Shields at maximum," added the engineer. "Engines ready for combat maneuvers," confirmed the pilot. Nodded. His crew was the best humanity had to offer. They had trained for years for this moment. They were ready. The enemy is hailing us. Again, said the communications officer. Ignore them, said, I have nothing more to say to them. The fleet opened fire. First, 12 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously, filling space with deadly energy. The barrage was overwhelming, a wall of destruction that would have vaporized any ship that had ever faced. Prometheus did not try to dodge. Instead, it flew straight into the attack, shields holding the engineer reported, his voice tight with tension. Taking damage, but shields are holding. Smiled, this was exactly what he had expected. The human engineers had redesigned the shield systems from the ground up. They had removed the elegant safety limiters and replaced them with brute force human technology. The shields were now crude and power hungry, but they were incredibly strong. Return fire, ordered. The Prometheus answered with its own weapons. Human engineers had upgraded the guns as well, adding nuclear-powered capacitors that the original designers would have considered dangerously unstable. The result was a weapon that fired slower than the original but hit much, much harder. The first shot struck a cruiser in the engine section. The explosion tore the ship in half, debris scattered across space like confetti. Commander watched in horror as one of his ships died. His mind could not process what he was seeing. That primitive wreck had destroyed a warship with a single shot. That was impossible. That simply could not happen. Focus all fire on that vessel, he commanded. Destroy it now. 11 cruisers concentrated their attack on the Prometheus. The human ship shuddered under the assault. Warning lights flashed across every console. Damage reports flooded in from all sections. Shields down to 60%. The engineer reported, hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Casualties reported. Did not flinch. Continue attack pattern. Target the next ship. The Prometheus dove into the heart of the enemy fleet, firing as it went. It moved in ways that made no sense to the commanders. It took risks that no sane pilot would take. It deliberately absorbed attacks that could have been avoided, trading damage for position. What are they doing? Demanded. Why do they not retreat? His tactical officer shook his head in confusion. I do not understand their strategy, Commander. They are fighting as if they do not care about survival. That was exactly correct. Human pilots had been trained to think differently than their alien counterparts. Doctrine emphasized preserving ships and minimizing losses. Human doctrine emphasized winning at any cost. A second cruiser exploded, then a third. The battle had been going for exactly 4 minutes. Back on Luna Base watched the tactical display with growing hope. The Prometheus was taking terrible damage, but it was still fighting, and it was winning. Signal the reserve fleet, she ordered. Tell them to begin their approach. Stay hidden until Captain Cole gives the signal. 50 human ships began moving from their hiding places behind Earth's moon. They crept forward slowly, using the bulk of the planet to mask their presence. The sensors were focused entirely on the Prometheus. They did not see the trap closing around them. Cole knew his ship could not survive much longer. The shields were failing. The hull was cracked in a dozen places. Fires burned in compartments throughout the vessel, but he had done what he needed to do. He had kept the enemy focused on him. Send the signal, he said. Tell the fleet to attack. Message went out across human communications channels. 50 ships received the order and accelerated to full speed, was about to order another volley when his sensor officer screamed. In alarm. Commander, multiple contacts emerging. From behind the planet, spun to look at. His display, his blood went cold. 50 ships were converging on his fleet from all directions. 50 ships that looked like smaller versions of the nightmare vessel he had been fighting. Primitives had not built one ship. They had built an entire fleet. Impossible. He whispered. The human fleet hit the formation like a hammer striking glass. They attacked from every angle. Simultaneously, their weapons tearing into ships that were already damaged. From fighting the Prometheus, the formation shattered. Ships tried to retreat, to regroup, to establish some kind of defensive position, but humans gave them no time. Human pilots flew their ships with suicidal aggression. They rammed damaged enemies. They flew directly into point-blank range and unloaded their weapons. They sacrificed themselves to take out priority targets. One human destroyer was caught between two cruisers. Instead of trying to escape, the pilot flew his ship directly into the larger enemy's engine section. Both vessels exploded. The second cruiser was destroyed moments later by the destroyers. They are insane, said these creatures. Are completely insane. He was beginning to understand something terrible that had always assumed that inferior species were inferior in every way. Weaker technology meant weaker minds, weaker spirits, weaker will, but these humans were proving that assumption wrong. The primitives fought like demons. They showed no fear of death. They took losses that would have broken any fleet and kept attacking. Every time thought the battle was turning. Another wave of human ships would appear and push him back. Battle lasted 11 minutes total. When it was over, 6 cruisers were destroyed. The remaining 6 were badly damaged, several of them barely able to move. Human losses were 17 ships destroyed and most of the remainder damaged. Stared at his display in shock. He had lost half his fleet to primitives, half his fleet destroyed by insects who should not have been able to even see his ships, much less fight them. Commander, said his communications officer, the human vessel is hailing us again. Accepted the transmission. The same human face appeared on his screen. Captain Cole was covered in blood and dust. His bridge was burning behind him, but his voice was still calm. Commander, I am offering you a choice. Take your remaining ships and leave this system. Return to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not theirs. Tell them that humanity is not to be touched. Struggled to find words. You cannot win, he said. The Empire has thousands of ships. You have destroyed 6 cruisers. That is nothing. When word of this reaches the Emperor, he will send an armada to burn your world to ashes. Cole smiled. Let him try. We will be waiting. The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long moment. His pride demanded that he stay and fight. His honor demanded revenge for his fallen ships, but he was a practical commander, and he knew that continuing this battle would only result in total annihilation. Set course for the nearest relay point, he ordered. We are leaving. The surviving ships turned and fled. They limped toward the edge of the solar system, carrying with them the most important news the Empire had received in centuries. Back on Luna Base, watched the enemy retreat. Tears streamed down her face. Around her, controllers and officers cheered and embraced each other. They had done it. They had actually done it. "Get me," Captain Cole said. Communication was established moments later appeared on her screen, looking exhausted but triumphant. "We did it, Doctor," he said. "We actually did it. You did it. Corrected. You and your crew and every person in this fleet. I am so proud of you. I am so proud of all of you." Shook his head. "It was your vision that made this possible. You saw what we could become when everyone else thought it was impossible. None of this would have happened without you." Felt her old heart swell with emotion. She had given her entire life to this project. She had sacrificed everything for this moment, and now, finally, she knew it had all been worth it. "What happens now?" asked. Took a deep breath. "Now we prepare." "You heard what said. The Empire will come back. They will come back with more ships than we can count. We need to build more vessels, train more crews, develop new weapons. We need to be ready for whatever they throw at us." And the world, the public, considered this question carefully. The secret was out. Now the existence of the fleet could not be hidden anymore. Soon everyone on Earth would know the truth about what had happened today. The world needs to know everything. Decided no more secrets. We will tell humanity the truth about the Empire, about the threat we face, and we will ask them to join us in defending our home. The news spread across Earth within hours. Videos of the battle were broadcast on every channel. The world learned about the alien threat, the secret fleet, the victory that had been won in the darkness of space. The reaction was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers on every continent. Scientists and engineers offered their services. Factories converted to military production. The world united behind a single purpose like never before in history. Appeared on global broadcasts to explain what had happened and what was coming. She did not hide the truth. She did not downplay the danger. She told humanity that they faced extinction, that the most powerful empire in the galaxy wanted them dead, that the war ahead would be long and brutal. And then she told them something else. Today a fleet of human ships defeated the forces of an alien empire. We fought against enemies who considered us insects, who believed we were too primitive to matter, and we proved them wrong. We proved that humans are not weak. We are not insignificant. We are not alone." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "The battle ahead will be hard. Many of us will not survive, but I believe in humanity. I believe in our courage, our stubbornness, our refusal to give up even when everything seems hopeless. Those qualities carried us through the ice ages. They carried us through world wars and plagues and every disaster that has ever threatened our species, and they will carry us through this." The speech was broadcast to billions of people. It was translated into every language. It was replayed countless times on every network, and humanity answered. Shipyards expanded. New vessels were laid down. Training programs every day brought new recruits, new resources, new determination. The world had never seen unity like this. Old enemies worked side by side. Old hatreds were forgotten. There was only one identity now, only one tribe that mattered. Human. Meanwhile, the Prometheus was towed back to the lunar shipyards for repairs. The damage was extensive. Entire sections had to be rebuilt from scratch, but the ship's crew refused to leave. They stayed with their vessel, helping with repairs, ready to fight Again as soon as possible, Cole visited. One night months after the battle, he found her in her office staring at charts and projections. "You should rest," he said. "You push yourself too hard." Shook her head. "I will rest when it is over, when the Empire is defeated. When Earth is safe, that could take years, decades maybe, then I will rest. When I am dead." Looked up at him with tired eyes. "I started this project when I was young. I will finish it even if it kills me." Sat down across from her. "Enemy will return. We hurt them today, but we did not defeat them. The Empire has resources we cannot match, I know." Said, "But we have something they do not." What? Smiled. "We have nothing to lose. The fight to expand their empire, to gain more slaves and more territory. They fight for power and pride. We fight for survival. We fight for our homes and our families and our species. That makes us more dangerous than they can possibly imagine." She pointed at the charts on her desk. "Look at these production numbers. In 1 year we have increased our fleet threefold. In 2 years we will have 100 ships. In 5 years we will have 1,000, and every single one of those ships will be crewed by humans who would rather die than surrender." Studied the numbers. They were impressive, but they were also terrifying. The rate of construction required incredible sacrifices. Every resource on Earth was being diverted to the war effort. People were working themselves to exhaustion. The entire planet had become a single factory dedicated to producing weapons. "Can we sustain this pace?" he asked. "We have no choice," said. "The Empire will not give us time to recover. They will come back as soon as they can gather a fleet large enough to overwhelm us. We must be ready." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the lunar surface stretched away toward the horizon, broken only by the lights of the shipyards. "When I was a little girl," she said, "I used to dream about meeting aliens. I thought they would be wise and kind. I thought they would teach us the secrets of the universe. I never imagined that the first aliens we met would want to kill us." She turned back to, "But maybe this is better. Maybe we needed an enemy to unite us. Maybe we needed a threat to make us realize what we could become." Nodded slowly. "I think you might be right." Returned to her desk and picked up another report. "Go rest, Captain. You have earned it. Tomorrow we begin planning the next phase." The next phase. His eyes hardened with determination. "Defense is not enough. We cannot simply wait here and hope to survive. Sooner or later we must take the fight to them. We must show the Empire that Earth is not just a difficult target. We must show them that we are a threat they cannot ignore." Understood. The battle today had been a victory, but it was only the first step. The war was just beginning. He saluted and left the office, leaving alone with her charts and her plans. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. But among those stars, somewhere far away, frightened commanders were carrying news of their defeat back to the Empire. They were carrying warnings about the strange and terrifying creatures called humans. The galaxy was about to learn what Earth had proven today. Humanity was not to be underestimated, and the Empire's days were numbered. 3 years had passed since the first battle. 3 years of endless work, endless training, endless preparation. Earth had transformed itself into a fortress. The human fleet had grown from 50 ships to 300. Shipyards on the Moon, Mars, and the asteroid belt worked around the clock, producing new vessels as fast as possible, but knew it would not be enough. She sat in the command center on Luna Base, watching the long-range sensor display. Her hair was completely white now, and her face was deeply lined with age and exhaustion. The doctors told her she needed to rest, but she ignored them. There was no time for rest. There might never be time again. Report, she said to the sensor officer. The young man's face was pale. The enemy fleet has passed the outer markers. They will reach Earth in approximately 18 hours. Stared at the display. The enemy formation was massive, a cloud of red dots that seemed to fill the entire screen. 300 ships, the largest fleet the Empire had assembled in centuries. Emperor himself was leading the attack. He had declared that the insult to his empire could not stand. The primitives who had dared to destroy his ships would be made an example. Earth would burn. Humanity would be exterminated. The galaxy would learn what happened to those who send word to all fleet commanders. Ordered emergency briefing in 1 hour. The message went out across the solar system. Ship captains received their orders and acknowledged the largest military operation in human history was about to begin. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched his crew prepare for battle. His ship had been rebuilt and upgraded many times over the past 3 years. It was barely recognizable as the same vessel that had first risen from the Siberian ice, but it was still the heart of the human fleet, still the symbol of everything they had achieved. This is it, he said to Commander Sarah. The real battle. Everything else was just a warm-up. Sarah nodded grimly. Are we ready? As ready as we can be. Looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy. They outnumber us nearly equally now, but we have better technology, better training, and better motivation. That has to count for something. It will, Sarah said. It has to. The briefing brought together every senior commander in the human fleet. Some attended in person, some via holographic link from distant ships. Addressed them all from the main conference room of Luna Base. You all know why we are here, she began. The enemy is coming with everything they have. Emperor has sworn to destroy us completely. He believes this will be easy. He believes we are still the primitive insects his surveys reported years ago. She paused, letting her words sink in. He is wrong. We are not insects. We are humanity, and we do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not accept extinction. Pulled up a tactical display showing the battle plan. Our strategy is simple. We cannot match them in a straight fight, so we will not give them one. We will use the geography of our system against them. We will hit them where they are weak. We will make them pay for every kilometer they advance. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Human ships would use the planets and moons of the solar system as cover. They would launch attacks from hiding, strike hard, and retreat before the enemy could respond. They would force the massive fleet to spread out, to chase shadows, to exhaust themselves, pursuing enemies they could barely see. The enemy expects us to line up and die like good victims, said. We will not give them that satisfaction. We will fight like humans fight, dirty, tricky, and absolutely refusing to quit. Commanders responded with fierce approval. They had trained for years for this moment. They were ready. The battle began 6 hours later. The fleet entered the solar system in perfect formation. Hundreds of ships arranged in geometric patterns that had been used for thousands of years. Emperor sat on his throne aboard the flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his forces advance. With absolute confidence, sensors detect human ships near the fourth planet, reported his tactical officer. Waved his hand dismissively, sent a squadron to destroy them, continue the advance. 20 cruisers broke away from the main fleet and headed toward Mars. They found a small group of human ships waiting for them, seemingly caught by surprise. The ships accelerated, eager for easy kills. The human ships fled toward the red planet. They followed, moving faster and faster, confident their superior speed. They did not see the minefield until it was too late. Hundreds of nuclear devices had been seeded throughout the space around Mars. They detonated in a cascading chain, engulfing the pursuing ships in fire. 8 cruisers were destroyed instantly. The survivors limped back toward the main fleet, badly damaged. Watched the disaster unfold on his display. His calm confidence flickered for just a moment. They have prepared defenses, he observed. No matter. We have ships to spare. Continue the advance. But the advance was no longer smooth. Every step forward met resistance. Human ships appeared from behind moons and asteroids, launched attacks and vanished before they could respond. Minefields and traps slowed the fleet's progress. Supply ships were ambushed and destroyed. They had expected a quick and decisive victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting through a gauntlet of death. Hours passed. The enemy fleet pushed forward, paying for every kilometer with blood. They lost 30 ships, then 40, then 50. The humans lost ships too, but they did not let up. Every time they destroyed a human vessel, 2 more would appear to take its place. Where are they all coming from? Demanded. Our intelligence said they had 300 ships. We have destroyed nearly 100 already, and still they keep fighting. His officers had no answer. They did not understand what they were facing. The truth was that humans had built more than just warships. They had built decoys, drones, and automated weapons platforms. They had prepared the entire solar system as a battlefield. Every moon was a potential ambush site. Every asteroid could hide a threat. They were not fighting a fleet. They were fighting a solar system that had been turned into a weapon. The final battle took place near Earth itself. They had fought their way through the outer system, losing nearly a third of their fleet in the process, but they still had over 200 ships, and they were determined to finish what they had started. Cole gathered the remains of the human fleet. For the last stand, they had 160 ships left, many of them damaged. The odds were not good, but nobody talked about surrender. This is it, broadcast to his fleet. Behind us is our home, our families, everything we love. If we fail, they will all be destroyed. There is no retreat. There is no escape. We either win here or we die trying. The response came back from every ship, every crew, every soldier. We understand. The battle began at dawn on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 200 ships faced 160 human vessels. The largest space battle in the history of either species was about to begin. Emperor watched from his flagship with growing anticipation. Finally, he said, they have stopped running. Now we will crush them like the insects they are. He ordered the fleet to attack. They advanced in their traditional formation, weapons blazing. They expected the humans to break and scatter as they had before. Instead, the human fleet charged directly at them. "What are they doing?" asked In confusion. "This is suicide." It was suicide, and it was working. Human ships drove directly into the heart of the enemy formation. They ignored defensive positions and tactical advantages. They flew straight at the enemy and opened fire at point-blank range. They took terrible damage, but they kept coming. A human destroyer collided with a cruiser. Both ships exploded, but the debris damaged 3 more enemy vessels. Another human ship flew into the engine section of a battle cruiser and detonated its reactor. The explosion destroyed 2 enemy ships and crippled 3 more. The humans were not trying to survive. They were trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. Watched his fleet crumble around him. He could not understand what he was seeing. No species fought like this. No species willingly threw away their lives for such small gains. It was madness. It was insanity. It was humanity. Cole piloted the Prometheus through the chaos of battle. His ship was badly damaged now. Half the crew was dead. Fires burned out of control in a dozen compartments, but the engines still worked and the weapons still fired, and that was all that mattered. "Captain," Sarah reported, her voice tight with pain, "I have located the enemy flagship. The Eternal Dominion. Emperor is aboard." Looked at his display. The enemy flagship was huge, easily the largest vessel in the enemy fleet. It was surrounded by a protective screen of cruisers and destroyers. Getting to it seemed impossible. "What is our weapon status?" asked. "Primary weapons offline. We have 2 torpedo launchers still functional." Made a decision. It was not a hard decision. He had always known it might come to this. Set course for the Eternal Dominion, he ordered. Maximum acceleration. Sarah understood immediately. "No, you cannot." "I can and I will." Looked at her with calm eyes. "The Emperor dies. The fleet loses its leader. The Empire loses its nerve. This is the only way. I am coming with you." Shook his head. "You need to get to the escape pods. Get the surviving crew off this ship. Someone needs to tell them what happened here." Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She stood and saluted, tears streaming down her face. "It has been an honor, Captain." "The honor was mine." The Prometheus accelerated toward the enemy flagship. The protective screen tried to stop it, but the human ship was too fast, too desperate. It blasted through the defenders, taking hit after hit, losing pieces of itself with every second. Emperor saw the crippled human ship coming straight at him. He finally understood what was happening. "Turn the ship," he screamed. "Get us out of here." But it was too late. The Prometheus collided with the Eternal Dominion at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. Both vessels were torn apart by the force of the collision. Fire and debris scattered across space. The Emperor's flagship, Pride of the Empire, broke into 1,000,000 pieces. Emperor died in the wreckage along with Captain Cole and 3,000 humans. The effect on the battle was immediate. The fleet lost all coordination. Ships that had been fighting in perfect formation suddenly began making mistakes. Captains panicked. Communication broke down. Fear spread through the fleet like a disease. The humans sensed the change and pushed harder. They attacked with renewed fury, driving the disorganized enemy back. Ship after ship fell to human weapons. Within hours it was over. The surviving Ships turned and fled, leaving behind the burning wrecks of nearly 200 vessels. The greatest fleet the Empire had ever assembled had been destroyed by the primitive insects of Earth. Watched the enemy retreat from Luna base. She was exhausted, grief-stricken, and triumphant all at once. So many had died. Her old friend was gone. Thousands of brave men and women would never see home again, but they had won against all odds, against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Humanity had won. It is over, someone whispered behind her. Shook her head. No, this was just the beginning. The Empire still exists. They will regroup. They will try again. She turned to face her staff. Begin rescue operations. Find every survivor we can. Salvage every ship that can be saved and start building more ships. More weapons, more defenses. Doctor, you need to rest, one of her aides said. The battle is won. Battle is won, agreed. But the war has just started, and I will not rest until it is finished. Outside, the debris of two fleets drifted through space. Human and wreckage tumbled together. No longer enemies, just metal and ash. Among the wreckage floated the remains of the Prometheus, the ship that had started everything, the ship that had been abandoned as garbage and rebuilt as hope, the ship that had given humanity its first victory and its greatest sacrifice. Cole had died aboard that ship, but his spirit lived on in every human who had seen him fight. He had shown them what courage really meant. He had shown them that even insects could bring down giants. The galaxy would remember this day. Day the Empire learned that humanity was not to be underestimated. The day the balance of power began to shift. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the surviving ships fled toward home, carrying news of their defeat, news that would shake the foundations of their entire civilization. The insects had won, and they were just getting started. The wreckage of the great battle still drifted around Earth when the rescue teams found Captain Cole. Against all odds, he had survived. The impact had thrown him clear of the bridge, and a failing emergency system had sealed him in a section of the ship that had stayed intact just long enough for help to arrive. He woke up 3 weeks later in a hospital on Luna base, was sitting beside his bed, looking older and more tired than he had ever seen her. You died, she told him. Your heart stopped for 6 minutes. The doctor said it was impossible for you to survive. Tried to smile, but his face hurt too much. I have always been bad at following the rules. Reached out and took his hand. The war is not over, but the Empire is broken. Their emperor is dead, their fleet is destroyed, and the entire galaxy knows what happened. Closed his eyes and listened as told him what had happened while he was unconscious. The news of the battle had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire had been defeated, not just beaten in a small skirmish, but crushed in a major battle. Their emperor was dead, their greatest fleet was destroyed, and the species that had done it was supposed to be primitive insects who could barely leave their own planet. The effect on the Empire was catastrophic. Subject species who had been slaves for centuries began to rise up. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds. Military, already weakened by the loss of the fleet, could not respond to every crisis. Cracks appeared in the foundations of an empire that had seemed invincible. And humanity was not done. Leaned forward in her chair, We have been receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Species we have never heard of are asking for help. They want to know if we can do it again. They want to know if we can teach them to fight like we do. Understood immediately. We are not going to stay here and defend, are we? No. Eyes burned with determination. Defense is not enough. The Empire will recover if we give them time. They will rebuild their fleets and come back for revenge. We cannot let that happen, so we take the fight to them. Nodded. We take the fight to them, and we do not stop until the Empire is destroyed and every slave is free. It took another 2 months to recover. During that time, the human fleet was rebuilt and expanded. New ships rolled out of the shipyards. Every day, volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. More than could be accepted. Humanity had found its purpose, and nothing could hold them back. The new fleet was larger and more powerful than anything humans had built before. 600 ships organized into battle groups, each one capable of taking on anything the Empire could send against them. And at the center of the fleet was a new flagship built from the recovered pieces of the Prometheus. They called it the Phoenix. Cole was given command of the entire fleet, would stay behind to coordinate the war effort from Earth, but she insisted on coming to the launch ceremony. She stood beside as the Phoenix prepared for its first mission. We started with one broken ship, she said, looking out at the fleet that filled the space around them. One piece of garbage that the aliens thought was worthless. Look what we built from it. Nodded. It is amazing what humans can do when we have something to fight for. The first target was a military base on the edge of Imperial space. It was heavily defended, but the defense had been weakened by the need to send ships to put down rebellions elsewhere. The human fleet dropped out of faster than light travel and attacked without warning. The battle lasted 4 hours. They fought bravely, but they were outmatched. Human ships moved with the same reckless aggression that had defined the defense of Earth. They took risks that no commander would consider. They pushed their ships beyond all safe limits. When the battle ended, the base was in ruins. Human Marines landed to secure the facilities and free the slaves who had worked there. These aliens, members of a species called the, looked at their liberators with disbelief. Who are you? Their leader asked. What do you want from us? The Marine captain removed his helmet and smiled. We are humans. We want nothing from you except your freedom. Go home. Tell your people that the Empire's days are numbered. The messenger reached his 2 weeks later. Within a month, the entire species had risen in rebellion against the Empire. They were not the only ones. The liberation campaign moved from world to world, system to system. Every victory inspired more rebellions. Every freed slave became a potential ally. The Empire, which had once seemed invincible, was crumbling from within. Cole led his fleet through battle after battle. He became a legend across the galaxy, a symbol of hope for species who had never known freedom. Stories spread about the human admiral who had crashed his ship into an emperor's flagship and survived. Some of the stories were true. Many were exaggerated. All of them helped the cause, coordinated everything from Earth. She had aged terribly in the years since the war began. Her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp. She directed resources, made alliances, planned strategies. She was the mother of the Rebellion, the woman who had seen a broken ship in a Siberian crater, and imagined a future where humans could challenge the stars, that tried to strike back. They assembled new fleets and launched counterattacks. Some of these attacks succeeded, destroying human ships and killing human soldiers, but for every victory they won, they suffered 2 defeats. The humans simply would not stop. 5 years after the defense of Earth, the human fleet entered the home system. They had prepared defenses around their capital world. They had gathered every ship they could find, every weapon they could build. They knew that the survival of their species depended on this battle, but they also knew deep in their hearts that they had already lost. Cole looked at the enemy formation and felt a strange mixture of emotions. This was the species that had tried to exterminate humanity. They had called humans insects. They had thrown away their ship as garbage, never imagining that the garbage would become their doom. Open a channel, said, I want to speak to their commanders. The transmission went out. The answered. The face on the screen was familiar. Commander, the officer who had abandoned the throne of silence on Earth all those years ago. He had risen through the ranks since then, surviving through luck and political maneuvering, while better officers died in battle against the humans. Admiral Cole said. His voice was tired, defeated. I suppose you have come to finish what you started. I have come to end this war, replied. Your emperor is dead. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is collapsing. How many more of your people need to die before you accept the truth? Was silent for a long moment. What are your terms? Unconditional surrender. Release all slaves. Withdraw from all conquered territories. Allow our forces to enter your space and ensure compliance. And if we refuse, looked at him with cold eyes, then we will take you by force. Your cities will burn, your people will die, and when it is over, we will occupy your world. Anyway, the only difference is how many corpses we have to step over to get there. Understood that this was not a bluff. He had seen what humans could do. He had watched them destroy the greatest fleet his empire had ever assembled. He knew that they would do exactly what threatened. I will need to consult with the High Council, he said. You have 1 hour. The channel closed, sat back in his chair and waited. 43 minutes later, the surrendered. The liberation of the galaxy took another 3 years to complete. Human ships visited every world the empire had conquered, ensuring that the slaves were freed and the oppressors were removed. Some accepted their defeat peacefully, others tried to resist and were destroyed. The humans did not conquer. They did not take territory or demand tribute. They simply freed the oppressed and moved on. They helped former slave species rebuild their societies. They shared technology and knowledge. They became protectors instead of conquerors. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A ceremony was held on to mark the official end of the war. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to witness the moment, and at the center of it all stood. She was 93 years old now. She could barely walk without assistance, but she had insisted on being there for this moment. She had started this journey decades ago, and she was determined to see it end. Commander knelt before her in chains. This was the tradition the humans had established. The war criminals would face justice, but first they would kneel before the woman who had made their defeat possible. Why? Asked, looking up at her. Why did you do this? You could have stayed on your world. You could have lived in peace. Why did you pursue us across the galaxy? Consider the question carefully before answering. You threw away what you thought was garbage, she said. You left a broken ship on a primitive world because you believed we were too stupid to understand it, but we did not see garbage. We saw hope. We saw possibility. We saw a chance to become something greater than we had ever been. She paused, gathering her strength. That is what humans do, Commander. We take what is broken and make it into something better. We face impossible odds and refuse to quit. We get knocked down and get back up again and again and again until we win or we die trying. She gestured at the gathered representatives, the freed slaves and the former masters. Your empire was broken long before we arrived. It was built on cruelty and oppression. It had no foundation except fear. We did not destroy it. We simply showed the galaxy that it could be fought. We showed them that the invincible was not so invincible after all, and once they saw that, they did the rest themselves. Lowered his head. What will happen to us? To my people? Sighed. That depends on you. You can spend the rest of your lives nursing your grudges and dreaming of revenge, or you can accept what happened and build something new. The choice is yours. She turned away from him and walked slowly toward the stage where the final ceremony would take place. Cole waited for her there, along with representatives from every species that had fought in the liberation. The ceremony was simple. A declaration was read proclaiming the end of the empire and the beginning of a new age. For the galaxy, species that had been enemies were pledged to work together as equals. A new government was established based on principles of freedom and cooperation that humans had championed from the beginning. Gave the final speech of her life that day. 40 years ago, she said, her voice weak but clear. I walked into a crater in Siberia and saw an alien ship. I saw technology beyond anything humans had ever imagined, but more than that, I saw what humanity could become. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of 100 different species. We are small creatures in a vast universe. We live for only a moment compared to the stars, but in that moment we can choose what we stand for. We can choose to be conquerors or liberators. We can choose to spread fear or spread hope. We can choose to tear down or to build up. She smiled, the smile of a woman who had accomplished everything she had set out to do. Humanity chose hope. We chose freedom. We chose to fight for something greater than ourselves. And today that choice has changed the galaxy forever. She paused, looking at Cole. I am old, and I am tired. I will not live to see what happens next, but I know that I am leaving the future in good hands, human hands, in the hands of all our friends. Across the stars, the crowd erupted in applause. Every species, every representative, every former slave and former master joined in the celebration. The war was over. A new age had begun. Died 6 months later peacefully in her sleep. She was buried on the moon, overlooking the shipyards where the Phoenix and so many other vessels had been built. Her grave marker was simple, just her name and 2 dates, but someone added an inscription beneath the dates. It said she saw garbage and made it into hope. The galaxy continued to change in the years that followed. Old hatreds faded, new friendships formed. Species that had fought each other for learned to live together in peace. It was not easy. There were setbacks and conflicts, but the foundation that humanity had laid held firm. Cole retired eventually, passing command of the fleet to younger officer. He spent his final years teaching at the academy, training the next generation of officers. He told them about the old days, about the first battle, about the sacrifices that had been made, and always he ended lectures with the same words. Remember what we learned. Remember that the impossible is just something nobody has tried hard enough to do. Remember that the strongest weapon in the universe is not a ship or a gun. It is the refusal to give up. The students would nod and take notes. Some of them understood, some of them would not understand until later when they faced their own impossible challenges. But all of them remembered far across the galaxy on 100 different world statues and monuments were built to honor the humans who had freed them. The stories of the Liberation War became legends told and retold until they were part of the mythology of every species. And at the center of all those stories was one ship, a broken, abandoned wreck that had been left on a primitive world by arrogant masters who thought it was worthless. The ship that became hope, the ship that changed the universe, the throne of silence which humans had named the Prometheus, and which had finally risen as the phoenix to light a fire that would never go out. Some species still did not understand how it had happened. They could not comprehend how a Class 7 species rated as no threat potential had risen to become the liberators of the galaxy. But those who had fought alongside humans understood. Humans were not special because of their technology or their numbers or their resources. They were special because they simply would not quit. They would take garbage and make it into weapons. They would take defeat and make it into determination. They would take death and make it into defiance. And that more than anything else was why they had lost. They had looked at humans and seen insects. They had not seen the fire burning inside those insects. They had not seen the stubbornness, the creativity, the absolute refusal to accept any outcome except victory. It was the greatest mistake any species had ever made, and it was the beginning of a new age for the galaxy, an age of freedom, an age of hope, an age built by humans from the garbage that an arrogant empire had thrown away. The universe would never forget, and neither would humanity.